Welcome back. This is Pairswell with Knitting. I'm Jennifer, and this is a podcast all about knitting, traveling, and all of my very favorite things while taking a year sabbatical. This is episode 2. Thanks for joining. In today's episode, I'm going to be featuring all things knitting and travel knitting. Before we get into all of that goodness, I'll share the sweater that I'm wearing. Today's sweater was a sweater that was featured as a finished object in my first episode. This is the Sorel sweater designed by Wool & Pine. I chose to knit this in 2 strands of Rauma Finull in this gorgeous apricot color. Details were shared in the show notes from my first episode. It's basically a dip stitch yoke that's formed inside out. You turn your work back right side over and continue knitting. It's a gorgeous sweater. It was super fun to make, and it was one of the few sweaters that I brought with me while on vacation. You're meeting us on vacation. We are currently right now in Nova Scotia, Canada, and in particular Terrence Bay. We are experiencing fog rolling up from over the ocean into where we are on a hill. It's been incredible watching all of it, and I'm really excited to feature an episode in the future that will be all about Nova Scotia and our travels. But there we are. So, getting into our travel knitting, I went on a run the other day and was just thinking about all of the things that I do to prep up before I go away, just so I can enjoy my experience while knitting. Being out of the house, you don't have access to obviously all of your knitting accoutrements at home. So what I do is I prepare how I'm traveling, where I'm traveling, and what I'm going to bring with me. So we've done many trips with travel knitting that I bring on the plane. And I find I don't have the restrictions that I've been hearing about from other people with knitting needles and that kind of thing, but I can talk about that as we go through the items that I'm featuring today. But in today's podcast in particular, I'm featuring the things that I brought with me. I had the luxury of space this time where we are doing a road trip. So we have a car that has space, unlike one little suitcase of luggage that I usually bring with carry-on. And so what I'm going to do is I'm organizing to share with you what to bring in general when space is tight and there might be more restrictions, and then the extra items that if you do have time and space, if that allows, then you can bring those surplus bonus items with you. So let's do it. So the first thing, of course, I bring in travel knitting are my interchangeable needles. I'm not sponsored for any of this, of course. This is all just my own goodness that has been brought with me where I've purchased my items. These are my very favorite interchangeables, which are the Chiagu. They're metal tip needle. These, I believe, are the 5-inch. I think there's 2 sets, 2 kinds. I have brought these with me on every flight I've gone on to. I do get funny looks every time I do get pulled over by the security that is running through all the fine checks, as they should. So what they will do is they will bring out my knitting needle and they actually will measure. Some of them look at me and I explain I'm a knitter. These are knitting needles, and they kind of still look at me, but they measure. And there is a specific measurement that I guess sharp, pointy objects cannot exceed, including blades. So I'm going to talk about that soon too. These meet the requirements of every flight I've done. I've done national, I've done international, never had a problem. I have heard that if you are weary, you can definitely bring wooden needles with you instead of the metal. I really think it's all the same, and we go to the airport early enough where if I absolutely had to check my carry-on baggage, I could, because we never check baggage. So that's the number one thing I bring. I bring interchangeables obviously because I have to bring less needle pieces with me, and this allows me to fulfill so many different sizes to do different objects and garments and that kind of thing. What I do want to say about this though with the interchangeables is I've purchased over the time additional knitting cords. This way you can have your work sit rested off the needles per se, but still on your knitting cords. Or if you're working on multiple projects that might require the same length of knitting cord, you're covered, because you can't always buy knitting cords wherever you're going. So I make sure I bring everything with me that I need. That's the interchangeables and extra cords required. Then we're going to get into colorful things. So again, with the traveling that we've done, and I'm talking in the car and in the airplane, I am the biggest loser. I lose items all the time while we are traveling, and I'm talking stitch markers, tapestry needles. I have obviously a nicer set at home that I enjoy using and working with. However, because I do sadly lose objects while traveling, I find colorful items are beneficial when they're flying all over the place in the floor. So these, for example, these are really inexpensive, like nitpick stitch markers. These just came in, I think I might have bought these separately. I can't remember, but they might have been like $5 Canadian, and they're just really bright. So if you're you know, like me, and you're knitting up a storm, feverishly knitting, I call it power knitting, you're hopefully going to find them wherever they land. Whereas the pretty markers, or sometimes like just the metal markers, you might not find. And I know I've lost heaps of those. So that is my idea for stitch markers. Having colorful stitch markers is helpful. In addition, with color, there's just going to be some noise of plastic. My apologies. Our colorful tapestry needles. These are the same. These are Knitter's Pride. So this may have meant that these also, the stitch markers were Knitter's Pride. These are Knitter's Pride tapestry needles. Same idea goes, where with stitch markers, they fall. I lose them completely. These come in multiple packs and are super bright and chunky. So there we are. They're less expensive if you do lose them, but easier to find if you do lose them. So these are all particular thoughts of a seasoned knitter while traveling, as something to be mindful about, something to consider when you are traveling. Those are the colorful items. Next is potentially, if you are needing your beautiful stitch markers, or I have other ideas for you as well, is that I've just used an old tea container. This was from a David's tea, actually, that I put a ton of all of my little knitting bits, stitch markers into while I'm traveling. And this can go with me in my knitting bag, or even in my little carry-on bag. In it, I'm going to show you one of my dirty little knitting secrets, and I said I was going to start sharing, but we got a few, so we got time. This is filled with safety pins. So I find safety pins often are free. You're getting them from the dry cleaner, wherever, but they're free. Or maybe if you are purchasing them super inexpensive, they offer a stitch marker that you can just hold on your needles. So if you do lose it, not a big deal. But also, because they open, they act like just those, the fancier stitch markers, these guys, that are pretty, and keep your row count as well. So that's another little dirty secret, knitting secret that I have, are just inexpensive or free little pins. And they work. And then you can travel and not feel bad if you leave them behind or lose them, like me. And then just conveniently in a little pack to go. It's cute. Stitch markers, needles. Pressing on, measuring. So if you do have a pack of the interchangeables, there's a flat, flimsy, waterproof ruler that comes in the pack, which is great. And it's in there always for me. However, sometimes you do need larger measurements. So I bring just a really small mini measuring tape with me. Again, I bought this on flights. It's metal casing. I already get pulled over because I already have my knitting needles, and totally fine. It's heavy for what it is, but I use it so often where I'm checking my row gauge or my, my yoke depth, etc. while I'm knitting. This is really helpful rather than using, a flat ruler. This is just easier for me. And then of course you can check bust size because it's bendy, it's a little flexy. So that is what I bring for my measuring. Then we're gonna get into scrap yarn. And I know this might sound really obvious, but when I first started knitting and traveling together, I wouldn't always have a piece of scrap yarn around. And then I would kind of rack my brain about what can I do? Can I break off a piece of yarn off of the yarn I'm already working on from another ball? But then I always panic and think, oh my goodness, what if I run out of yarn? Because I always usually play a very close game of yarn chicken. So I always keep in the little pocket of my interchangeables, little scrap yarn that I just tie up in a little loose knot. And then it's ready to go, so you can put stitches on hold or whatever it is you need to do. And of course, that could be in place of purchasing interchangeable needles and you don't want to have your stitches on hold with these or don't have enough scrap yarn. It takes no room, it weighs practically nothing. So that's the little tidbit there. Then scissors, the controversial scissors. So I purchased from the dollar store, these were like $1.50 craft scissors that, again, with the purpose, we were going down south. I thought if these get taken from me at the airport, no big deal. They're $1.50, they have no meaning to me. So again, every time that I've had stops from the security, they will measure the blade, and it is always way under what the maximum requirement or restriction is for bringing on blades onto a plane. These are fine to bring. Of course, I brought them with me because we're on a car trip. However, I would say with all the types of fibers that I'm knitting with, I usually don't even need scissors really. And if I do need to trim something, I might wait for home because now I just pull the yarn apart and break it. If you're using maybe a blended yarn with a synthetic, you might not be as lucky because they might be a little harder to break. But it works for me, the little craft scissors, and they're still trucking on, going strong. There we go, dollar store scissors. What else? I would also include then my barber cords. I think everyone who's a knitter has a pair, should have a pair of these guys. So I've chunked up 2 different sets of barber cords. These, of course, are used for putting stitches on hold, but more importantly for me, this was a massive game changer. When I had first started knitting, I would have to, with a sweater I was knitting, to do a proper try on for body, the height before you rib and getting a feel for what the sweater would look like. I would have to basically put all the stitches on the front, for example, on one long needle, while the back part of the body would remain on the original needle. So I'd have 2 needles going. Then I would put the piece over my head and try not wiggle through to not lose any stitches or drop stitches while I was doing a try on. And that was a pain, especially as a new knitter and constantly losing those stitches. I was watching podcasts and heard about these guys, the barber cords. Totally changed how comfortable I am now trying on garments with these. These, I'm sure most of you know already. These get put onto the end of a knitting needle, basically almost through a suction that happens with the needle. And you fish this through your garment. It they're long, so you can fit it over your head without the needle on there. I cheat and I leave the needle actually on both sides as I'm doing a try on, so I don't even have to readjust anything. And it's so light. They're plastic, some kind of synthetic material, and they're super easy to travel with. And it just allows me to be certain that when I'm knitting a garment, a sweater, a vest, that I'm going to get the fit that I want, like I would if I were at home. So these always come. And these are actually in my emergency knitting bag as well. Maybe that's for another episode. Having your phone to do things like taking pictures of patterns or charts. So, if you're in the car or if you're in, my cable needle just blew out, whoosh. Or on the airplane, you don't have to access the internet. So for example, like if you're online and you have a soft copy of whatever it is, of your pattern or chart, you don't need to use up data or not have access to internet. You can just have your photo and look at your photos, zoom in. Again, I feel like this isn't rocket science and you probably already know these things, but I'm just sharing what I do. And then as well, if you are a Google Suites user, on the Google Suites, you can always opt out or opt in, I guess, to view your PDF files, or any file for that matter, as offline. And then that as well, like I take the subway every day when I was working before sabbatical, that was a big deal for me. I couldn't access internet when I was underground. So having a photo or having that PDF copy available to me without accessing the internet was wonderful. What I also do when I'm away is I make notes in Notes. I have an iPhone. And so I find that I can make a quick and dirty little note about what I've changed, or again, any kind of tidbit that I need to remember, that what I normally would put in my knitting book, in my notes feature, the Notes app. And then I can record it or refer back to it while traveling. The calculator is already on your phone, so that makes everything super simple, so that math is just a button away, which is amazing. So yeah, having your phone, having access to your phone, and not necessarily with the internet, which in many places that we've traveled, I don't have internet outside of a hotel or a cafe, and I knit everywhere. So that works for me. Pattern choice. Pattern choice for travel for me is a big part of preparation in going away. I love packing and packing my clothes, thinking about outfits and things that I'm bringing with me to have such a great time. But in addition, I really like planning for knitting while I'm away for travel. With pattern and choice, I find the best options for me for travel are a pattern that I find I'm either familiar with, I've maybe knit before, a really simple pattern, or if I'm feeling, that I'm willing to take a risk, maybe it is a new for me pattern that has some different stitches, a different technique, but I know that I'm willing to go through that process. So I might have to do a lot of ripping back. And I'm not a massive person for swatching, although we all should be. However, when traveling, you don't want to be without enough yarn. You want to make sure that you're going to bring enough of whatever it is that you need so that you're not running out while you're away and then just sitting there, having nothing to do, no knitting. That would be my nightmare. So I do try to swatch sometimes before I go away with a pattern, especially if it's new, so that I know I'm going to have enough yarn. That's all part of it. In composition with pattern choice is yarn choice. So sometimes I try to think about how long I'm going for, what I would like to knit. I also think about biggest bang for your buck. So what I usually try to do is I will bring a small project already wound of course, with my yarn. So a sock yarn, I always have at least one ball of sock yarn wherever I'm traveling, because this usually you can compact it, squish it down, and it offers you hours and hours of knitting fun. And I always have my small knitting needles with me. And another dirty secret, which I'm giving away too many today of my knitting secret world. I don't knit fingering socks. I knit DK socks. So that means that I would be breaking this into 2 balls that I would have to prep before, which I would do at home. However, perhaps we'll get it. No, I have to pause. I'm getting excited about the other things. So let's conclude with yarn choice. So biggest bang for your buck, 1 ball of yarn, tons of things you can do. You could do even a little shawl, maybe a hat. Gives you some options, having just 1 ball of sock yarn, which is great, and wound if it's not already balled up in a skein or whatever. I would also say a big trip that we did last summer for about a month away in Western Europe is I knew I wanted to be entertained and enjoy everything around me that Western Europe has to offer while I'm knitting. I do find my level of joy and happiness in experience is usually heightened by other pieces. So I can enjoy a beautiful vista of the mountain and just, it's a dream come true. But having that knitting experience I get to enjoy the vista, that's just another level. Same for me goes with having a great cup of some kind of espresso beverage. I love coffee, and that heightens my experience. A great glass of wine, bubbles, great cocktail. There we go. So it's the pairs well with knitting. I love knitting and pairing it with other beautiful, joyful things. I do want to finish back to yarn choice. So for example, in that travel that we did that was an extended stay for about a month, is I chose a pattern that would include mohair, not maybe a popular type of yarn to bring on a plane or train, for example, although I did. But it was basically for weight and squishability. I knew that by bringing the mohair, I could suction it down into a Ziploc bag. You know what I'm talking about. You shove in all the balls into the bag, and instead of just closing it shut, just like having it open there, I squish it against the counter to kind of get the air out, and almost like vacuum seals your yarn. So it makes it super packable, and you can fit more stuff into your carry-on bag. Like these are all little hacks that I found over the years. I would not bring on a travel where I'm tight for space any really heavy yarns, heavy worsted, like 100% yarn kind of thing. I want to get in to some of the extras now that I've brought with me. So again, we haven't done a yarn trip. There's a Freudian slip. We haven't done a card trip for a bit. On this road trip, I had the luxury, like I was saying, of bringing extras. So I'm going to call these bonus travel yarn tools. Some of my bonus yarn travel tools is a lanolin wash. This is a rinse-free wool wash that I brought with me it smells so good, it's eucalyptus, in a small bottle that was almost finished. I used this at home, and I knew I was going to be finishing a sweater and a vest and maybe some other things while we're away. So I thought, if weather permits and space, I'm going to block my things, and I have. It's been amazing. I don't think I've ever blocked while traveling before, and it's turned out great. I have like just like a hair left. You can see totally of the soap left, and I might even just chuck it before we go home. I would never bring this on the plane because liquids are at a massive premium with all the other things that I'm bringing on. So if you felt super keen to block while you're away for whatever reason. An option could be a bar, like a wool wash bar, because at least that's a solid. You don't have to claim it as liquid, so it wouldn't count towards that really precious space of liquids. Or just don't bring it. I've never brought this on a trip before just because we had space, but it's been such a luxury item. It's been amazing. Another bonus item that I use every day while we've been away so far is my kitchen scale. I would never bring this on a plane with me, but because we've been staying at Airbnbs that offer the full Monty of a house, for example, or a condo, I thought a scale would work well, and I've been using it, like I said, all the time. So even because I do my DK socks, if I wanted to at night, I could chuck this into 2 balls, make sure by weighing that I've got 50 grams on each ball, and I'm ready to go for the next day for car knitting, for example. So I have another pretty big, I'd say, bonus item that I've brought on the trip with me, and it's big. So I don't have a yarn ball winder, but I do have this gorgeous, oh my goodness, hello, what are we called? We're not a ball winder, a Swift. So I brought this in case I was going to buy any skeins of yarn and obviously be too excited to just have them sit in my bag and not ball them up. So I brought my Swift, and this Swift, we live in a condo back in Toronto, which is tiny, so I need everything to be compact and tiny. And as a knitter, you know, the yarn takes up most of the space of the knitting corner. So with this is a really cool Swift from, again, not sponsored, the Fiber Artist. This was a Christmas present from my love. And this actually comes apart. I'll show you quickly. And I do this at home because we live in a small space and we need everything to be compact. This all came together. The little guy here, I should know what it is, some kind of wrenchy thing? I don't know. And you just undo the center. I don't know if you can see that. Whoop. This guy pops off. The shaft, I would call it the shaft or the base. You just pop the screw back on so no one gets stabbed, and that's great. It's heavy, but pretty compact. This is where the magic is. And then the Swift comes apart. So the X pulls out because it's like a puzzle piece. And then it's just like 2 shorter pieces of wood that I've packed really simply. This is hilarious. Into my knitting bag. So you've got this, the base, and then all these little pieces just go in a bag. And there's the Swift. I mean, car trip? Yes, please. Let's ball up all the yarn. That means we can get more. Okay, the Swift, obviously a bonus item because, you know, you're not bringing that guy on a plane. Okay, I think with the travel, I think that's pretty much it. I would say in general, being mindful of space, being mindful of pattern, being mindful of the tools you're bringing, and the type of yarn are all required in good prep before you leave the house for a period of time while you're traveling. And so you get more joy out of your knitting while you're away. I hope you found this podcast helpful and were able to take away some new ideas to you that could work. Give them a go. Let me know what you do. And until next time, thank you very much for watching. We'll see you soon. Thank you.